What is up, everybody? Welcome to a very special edition of The Rose Show here on St. Patrick's Day. I am your host, Jay. Who else but me? And today we have got the legendary Ken Shamrock with me. It is one of the funnest interviews I've done to date. Ken is an absolute legend, and man, he destroyed this interview, much like he destroys people's faces in the cage. Now, like I said today, it's St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day. The only green I got is my old Menace to Sobriety stuff, so that's going to have to do for now, I suppose. However, tonight, if you are going out and having a good time, please be careful. As always, get a designated driver. Don't risk it. As you know, police are out everywhere, I'm sure, already looking for people. And plus, it's just dumb to risk it. So be safe out there having a good time. And me, I am going to have a good time as well. Let's go ahead and drink one up for you. Cheers. I'm getting started early. Before we get going, I just want to say one thing real fast, because this is going to be the first real crossover into a different kind of combat sport shows that I've done to date. So I just want to go ahead and say, if this is your first time here, welcome. I've got plenty of stuff already posted for you, regardless of where you're viewing or listening to this on whatever platform that might be. Go ahead and check it out. I call this a variety show. I guess you could as well. And we've got all kinds of people. We got wrestlers. We got actors. Today, we've got former UFC champions. We got all kinds of things for you here at The Rose Show. And don't forget to like this episode and subscribe. That is the number one way you can help this show. Just go ahead and hit like on this episode wherever you're watching it or listening to, and hit subscribe as well. That is the fastest, easiest, and the freest way to support what I'm doing here. So if you already did all those things, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If not, it would mean the world to me if you would. So let's go ahead and get rolling with today's guest, Ken Shamrock, after a word from my sponsor. All right, everybody, it's time to stop and let you know about today's sponsor of the show, Crazy Martin's in Piqua, Ohio, one of my favorite places in the entire world to go to. Crazy Martin's has provided their customers with quality products for over 20 years, from ashtrays to water pipes and everything in between. Stop in, check out their selection, and of course, check out their pinball machines. With over 20 pins to choose from, there is something for everyone. Crazy since 1996. I don't just say this about every place. I love going to Crazy Martin's. I've always loved going to Crazy Martin's ever since I was of age to go to Crazy Martin's. It's one of my favorite places in the entire world. Me and my wife go there almost every Sunday to play pinball machines. It is one of the funnest spots in Ohio you could possibly find. It is in Piqua, Ohio. Check out their website at www.crazymartins.com. What is going on, everybody? Hello and welcome to yet another episode of The Rose Show. As usual, my name is Jay, and here with me today is one of my favorite Intercontinental champions of all time. He's a King of the Ring winner, NWA Heavyweight Champion, UFC Hall of Famer, and it's a travesty that he isn't a WWE Hall of Famer yet, but I'm sure that's coming soon. Ken Shamrock, my brother, it is an honor and a privilege to talk to you today. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Why don't you go ahead and go over your background real fast for everybody and just tell everyone, what was life growing up for Little Shamrock and how you got into the things you got into.
Boy, that's not a short story.
That's fine. We got plenty of time, my man.
Yeah, I was born in Georgia, Macon, Georgia. I was born into a stable environment. We were left home quite a lot. So a lot of bad things happened as we were growing up, pretty much on the streets, defending ourselves. I'm talking 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. So people can't imagine that you'd be left home alone, but that was true. I had two older brothers. We were a year apart. Wasn't soon after all of that was taking place, my biological mother met this guy that was in the Air Force. The Army, flew helicopters in combat. Ended up hooking up with him. We jumped in I believe it was a 68 or a 69 Camaro, drove all the way up to a place called Napa, California, which is a long ways away and much, much different from Georgia. The environment, everything. Ended up getting in trouble there because I talked differently, walked differently, fighting all the time. Ended up getting stabbed at 10 years old. I was in and out of juvenile hall, group homes. Ended up at a place called the Shamrock Boys Home at 13 after going through all those placements. That's when I really started to actually get help. All the other homes were just placing you there, housing you there. You know, you were a number, you did chores, you did this. They'd send you back into the same environment and you do the same stuff over again. Whereas this time I got an opportunity to really stay there. And so I stayed there from the time I was 13 till I was 18 years old. Then I got adopted by the homeowners because they were truly, really my parents. They really raised me. They gave me an opportunity to vent my frustration and anger into sports. I became relevant because I could play sports. I was so angry and I had so much hate that I was able to vent it into something where I was getting praised for it. Of course, then that led me into going to college, playing some college ball, had opportunities to meet people, ended up going to Japan, made my name there in pro wrestling, Mooresville, North Carolina, did a circuit there. So I really started out with pro wrestling first and really started to make a name for myself as Vince Torelli, Mr. Wrestling Vince Torelli. Then I got a shot in Japan also to jump into what they call the UWF, which was more of a work style, but what you would see in, like, say, UFC, except it would be open hand striking. You would have the throws, the kicks, everything, the ground, the submissions, all of this stuff, but the ending was predetermined. And so I did that for a while, made a huge name for myself there, got real popular because I could really, really now vent frustration and anger, even though it was entertainment. Yeah. In between the finish and that, you could really go pretty hard. Right. Then Panaki came to me and said that he wanted to take pro wrestling and make it real, which is what we were doing, the hybrid pro wrestling. Wanted to know what it was like if we just basically took out the finish and just let people finish the way they want to finish. Whoever's the best wins. And so we formed Pancras. That's where I think I showed the world who I was, because I didn't have to lay down for guys that were older than me. I didn't have to lay down for people that I knew I could beat. And it was just me out there. Although there were different times in different places where, you know, because it was a Japanese organization and it was good for business, where I had to do certain things. But that was only 2 times that I was asked for that. But I won't get into that because those are things that just happen in the world and you either do or you don't. And so I got past those things. Otherwise, my record in Pancras would have been pretty damn clean. But it was what it was. I ended up finding UFC because I was getting kind of frustrated with the process with Pancras. Ended up jumping into the UFC while I was in Pancras and while I was the champion. And ended up becoming the face of that organization and becoming really the very first, what we see today as a single fight champion. They call it super fight. And they don't, for whatever reason, they don't give me credibility for being the heavyweight champion because we fought all weight classes, including heavyweight, and I won. So, right, and yeah. It was Dan Severn and Hoist Gracie, in which I beat up on. But nevertheless, along with Oleg, and both of those guys were pretty big heavyweights. But they say it was super fight, not classified as heavyweight, even though it was all one weight. So ended up becoming the face of that. And, the rest of it was history. I jumped back into wrestling after a few times in the UFC and jumped back into the pro wrestling and made some pretty good moves in WWF. It was very exciting to be able to go back at that level, knowing where I started at. And the journey that I took wasn't a direct one to get there, but I got there.
Yeah, sure. Real fast, though, before you move on, because I think anyone, whether you were a casual fan or, you watch UFC or watch it now, everyone remembers your rivalries between Hoist Gracie and Tito Ortiz. In your opinion, do you think the UFC is where it is today if you didn't have those rivalries? Because even I knew almost nothing about MMA back then in early 2000s, but I knew the name Tito Ortiz because of Ken Shamrock. I knew the name Hoist Gracie because of Ken Shamrock. Do you think the UFC would be where it's at if it wasn't for that time that you spent?
That's hard to say. I think that, and because of the love of the sport, I don't think it's going anywhere. I'm not sure how fast they rise or how fast they get there. But you definitely needed a character and a personality, because it was clear when not when Hoist, but when Tito was at Reign and I wasn't there, they were getting less than 30,000 buys. I mean, they were dying, right?
Yeah.
So they needed someone that was going to be able to give them that shot, to be able to
Right.
get those numbers to jump up, and I was that guy. I was the guy that did that. I gave Tito Ortiz not gave it to him because he earned every second of it. He was one bad dude. And in my opinion, at that time, was pound for pound the best fighter in the world, in my opinion, at that time. Yeah. So I truly believe that without having that type of character, whether it was me or someone else, it wouldn't have gone anywhere, because you saw they tried to do it with just Tito, and he had character, but he didn't have anybody across from him to help him build that character and help him become that guy.
Yep. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I could not agree even more. Okay, awesome. Well, real fast, because you mentioned it real quick, I saw Tatanka brought something up recently that you just talked about. I'm so glad you covered that, because I saw that picture and I wanted to ask you how that came about, because I was kind of unsure. How did that name come around? Vince Terrell, is that what it is?
Torelli. Yeah, Vince Torelli.
Torelli?
Yeah, that was a name that I got. I'm actually Irish, but people think I look Italian and talk, because I still carry that Georgia accent even now, as long as I've been away from there, and I left at a young age, but I still have it. That's who I am. So when I'm around people, they always think, because of that talk and the way I talk, and the kind of the way I look, they think I'm a Italian, but I'm actually Irish, pretty strong Irish too, not just a little bit, but a lot.
Yeah.
So they came up with
awesome.
that because of my looks, the way I talked. And of course, I look like one of the wrestlers in the old school days that was also Italian. So they felt like they were going to try to maybe remix that or remake that character, because my skill sets were more of a basic wrestler, the normal wrestler, like Arn Anderson and the guys that literally had wrestling backgrounds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Even like Buzz Sawyer, just the wrestling, credentials that he had, even in amateur status, that was me. That was the kind of wrestler I was.
Yeah. Did you ever try to mold yourself based on, well, I guess I should back up. Were you a pro wrestling fan? Were you when you were little? And if you were, did you take anything from anybody in particular to form your persona?
I didn't, because if you know my story, I was locked up a lot, so didn't have a lot of TV. And if you did have TV, you had to watch whoever was watching it. Tougher guys in the room were watching. So it wasn't like I could sit around and watch TV. And then when I was in group homes, we were never in the houses. And the houses most of the time never had TVs, except for Bob Shamrock's a really nice home. But the rest of them were just beat down and just smelly and old, and it was bad. So my upbringing wasn't really, I didn't have any role models.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. All right. Just curious. Well, that how I know you is obviously from the WWF. I was a super fan around the time when you came in. What was the process like of getting connected with the WWF, and how did you get that ball rolling?
Yeah, we had some issues, or not necessarily me, but because I was attached to it, the issues were mine also. But if you remember back in those days, UFC was going through a lot of lawsuits. Every single city they would go in, they would get cleared to do the show. You would get there, and then you had these people that were protesting it. and then these different types of political figures that were trying to get their names out there then would start getting on radio shows and TV and start talking about how barbaric it was, because all they were doing was trying to get clicks and get their face out in front of something so that they could
Yeah.
build their political boundaries. And so UFC was stuck in the middle of that. Every time we would go somewhere, everything was cleared, and then you get there, and then you dealt with that. And then there was a lot of court things that had to happen in order for them to be able to release the event to happen, because we were already cleared. There were 2 times where that didn't happen, and we had to really overnight adjust and move to another city, which was not easy, but they did it. But it cost a lot of money to do that. And so it really strained the company. And we had an agreement that I would take so much that year, and then the next year I would get this much. And they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to do that. And I understood it. But because of the gym that I built, where it had 3 different sections, the mat room, the boxing room, and the weight room, I had a group home for 6 kids, which my father ran. I had my house, and then I had the fighter's house. So these were all things that I accumulated under the Lion's Den to help build this business. And I needed a certain amount of money to be able to cover those bills on a monthly basis. And that was built into the contract. And I always told myself that, I'm going to achieve and do what I want to do as long as it doesn't hurt my family. And this would, because I wouldn't be able to keep the fighter's house up, wouldn't be able to keep the group home, and I wouldn't be able to take care of my family. So I had to make a decision on whether to stay in the MMA world and cut loose the fighters, cut loose the group home kids, and focus on just taking care of my family. And I felt bad. I felt real uneasy about that, because I made a promise to these people that I would do what I said I was going to do. I was going to train them, and I was going to turn them into great fighters, and I was going to help these kids have a second chance. And so I made the decision to hold up to my agreement that I made with them. And so instead of me following my dream and what I wanted to do, I went and did something else in order to keep all these things up and going. But I always, in the back of my head, knew that I would get back to this when the business would start making it's because I always felt like it wasn't going to go anywhere. But right now it was really struggling, and I would come back to it. But right now I got to make the money I need to make to be able to support all these things I've got going and support the promise that I made. So that's kind of the story behind me having to move away from the MMA for a while and go into pro wrestling. And fortunately, because of my beginnings of wrestling, there was some love there. There was some interest there for me. But once I got into pro wrestling with WWF, it was a much, much different from what I was used to in the lower circuit. It was so much more exciting, so much more fun, so much more professional in some ways. But working with the talent there and the level of wrestlers was unbelievable, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah, understandable. And that's very admirable. A lot of people, when they come to that kind of a decision or a crossroads in life, they usually take the selfish route, and you did not. So much kudos and much props to you for that, man. Seriously.
Thank you.
As somebody like me, I didn't have a storied past like you did as far as how you grew up, but my family struggled, and if it wasn't for the help of other people doing stuff like that, we wouldn't have made it. So that means a lot to me that you took that route. Seriously. um the like I said, I know that's how I know you, from your time in WWF. I legit thought you would kill me if I ever ran into you because of how you carried yourself. I'm not even kidding. I thought if I ever saw you, you would snap and break my ankle in half. How did you come up with that presentation of the snapping? Because I think that was a very integral part in the presentation of Ken Shamrock.
I think that's me. I mean, I just did
Right.
it. There was no plan. There was none of that. I went in and I just let my emotions run wild. Obviously, in fighting, you got to control them to a point, and act like you've been there before. And there's just a different level of what you're supposed to do in fighting, right? In wrestling, the more that you let yourself be real and let your emotions flow and let people get to know you, who you are, the better you become, whether it's a heel or a face. And so all I did was let me be me and let my emotions show. And that's the way I came out. And fortunately for me, you know, people liked it. Some didn't, but majority of them did.
Yeah, I loved it. Like I said, it was one of the most entertaining parts for me watching you. And one of the things I kind of want to touch on before we get too much farther, there's an infamous match that has resurfaced over the last 10 years or something or so in gifs or memes or whatever it might be, short video clips of you and Vader. And it's a shot of when looks like you got stiffed pretty hard by him. What exactly happened in that scenario? Because that's something I've always kind of wondered about. Because it looks like he really hit you pretty hard. What happened? It was in your house, I think. 15. Does that sound right?
I don't remember, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because even the people in the locker room, in the back room, when we walked back to, they were like, "Brother, is that real? Are you okay?" And I'm thinking to myself, "What are you talking about?" Like, I had no clue. Like, I had no clue. Like, what are you guys talking about? You know, because I think people forget that I spar for fun. I mean, like, I go in and I literally get after it and I spar and I get hit and I roll with those punches when we're sparring. And these are my friends. Like, these are people I train with and work with, and we hit each other and we beat each other up to get us ready for fights. So when I went into this wrestling match, this was one of my first ones for many, many years. And Vader, they picked Vader for that reason, was because they didn't want one of their superstars walking out of the match because I stiffed them or because I may have been too aggressive on them. So they put somebody in there like Vader, who is a tough guy, that whatever I did to him, he would be okay. He's big enough, strong enough, and tough enough to where I'm not going to hurt him. And so I don't know, but I heard stories that I need him in the nose or something like that, where it was stiff. And so he basically was trying to give me a receipt back. I didn't realize
Mm.
that. I didn't realize it. I just thought that was part of the match. And it meant nothing to me when he did it. When I hit the ground, if you watch the match real closely, after he hits me and I'm on the ground, there was something he needed to do right after that off the side of the rope. And so I had to reposition myself so he had room to walk. So if you watch the match after I take the fall, watch myself start moving a little bit after he hits me, you'll know that that was part of the match. And there was really, like I said, when I went back, everybody's like, "Dude, is that real? You guys okay? You guys good?" And I'm like, looking around, what are you guys talking about? It's like, that was a really good match, but man, that was stiff. And I'm thinking to myself, what's stiff? What's that? Like, I didn't know this. I thought this is the way wrestling was supposed to be. But then Bret Hart comes up to me and goes, "Dude, that was a great match, man, for your first match, one of your first matches. It was a good match." Said, "But you're not going to be able to do that match like that with everyone." And I'm thinking to myself, what's he talking about? It's like,
Right.
you can't do that with Shawn Michaels. you ain't going to do that with such and such. And so I learned real fast after that, because I understood that it's not a spar. It's not like sparring. This is different. Even though I wrestled before, I had five years of fighting, and sparring to me was wrestling. Like, you'd hit them, bang, bang, you get in, but you want to make sure they feel it. So it felt like that's what wrestling. But I understood from that match that, okay, I have to back off that tenfold, because I'm not going to be able to have matches with Shawn Michaels or Hunter Hearst Helmsley or any of these other guys that are literally purist wrestlers that do not want you to tag them. Me, I always told people, if I don't feel it, I can't sell it. That's just who I am. So you got to hit me, and I'll roll with it or I'll catch it, but I'll be okay. Because remember, I fought with professionals. I fought with guys that were world champions, and so I'm in with pro wrestlers. So I needed
Right.
them to bring it, so I felt comfortable being able to sell it. So a lot of my matches, if you'll see in there, a lot of guys would hit me, but I wanted that. I needed that because I couldn't sell something I couldn't feel.
Yeah. And it was in your house 15, a cold day in hell. That was for anybody who wants to go back and watch the match. It's a very good one. Do you what was the process of you getting to the Intercontinental Championship? Because again, you are literally one of my favorite, if not I'm gonna be honest. You're probably my favorite from that era, my favorite Intercontinental Champion, because you were believable and it was just very entertaining. What was that process like, and how were you informed? Hey, we're gonna be giving you the opportunity to run with this championship.
No, I just it was real loose. It was almost like they really didn't have a direction or a plan for me. It was more of in that week or that month, and even then with the Continental, they told me, but it was like a week or so or something like that. And I'd been doing these different matches with The Rock, and I had programs with other people, and it was almost like, okay, we're going to do this, and I didn't know the distance or the direction that we were going. And to this day, I still can't remember how the process even happened, because it felt like there was so many different things that they were going to do. And then all of a sudden we went this way and then we go that way. And it was like, I didn't know wrestling well enough to know that they didn't know what to do with me. Right. But they hung the strap on me. I was very happy about that, because it felt like, okay, I feel like now I got somewhere I'm going. But then once they hung the Intercontinental strap on me, it was like I was just wrestling all these different people with no direction. Like, where is this going? Because when I was working with The Rock, I felt like, okay, there's a direction here. He's got the title.
Yeah.
Boom. I'm going to get the title. I beat him. I don't remember which one it was, but it was the King of the Ring, I believe it was, or something like that, where I ended up beating him. And then I ended up getting the Intercontinental title, but I didn't beat it. I don't think I took it off him. I don't remember how that went, but I do remember after getting the title, it was like, it was one guy here and one guy, and it was just really, I had no direction. Like, what are we doing with me? What are we doing with the Intercontinental title on my waist? What are we doing with this? Where are we going? Because I felt like me and Rock had great chemistry. I felt like Stone Cold would be a great match with me and him, because we did one before, and I thought there was a lot to build on. I thought Bret Hart would be a great adversary for me, or even at one point, maybe we team up and we go against The Rock and Stone Cold. There was just so many thoughts that I thought, like, there's a direction here at the top, like using my abilities and my credibility to really get wrestling out there, in this genre of the mixed martial arts world. And it just felt like I could never get there. Like they wouldn't get me there. I just kept working with a lot of the talent underneath, and I got with Shawn Michaels a couple of times. I got with Bret. I got with Stone Cold, but there was no story. It was one-offs. And it just felt like they just didn't know what story to build. Well, then you get people like Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey that come in, and all of a sudden they know how to use them.
Right.
And it just felt like when I went in, I was the first one to do that, to be able to break that mold and show people that, hey, this can work. But those people back there who were writing those stories were definitely not doing what they should have been, because I should have probably been what they were doing with Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey early on.
Yeah, I completely agree. Somebody else they didn't really, have much, it seemed like much of a direction for either, was Dan Severn. Did they ever approach you and Dan about working a program together while you guys were both there?
We did a match once. They wanted me to put him over, so I put him over. And I felt like, okay, because usually if you put somebody over, you're getting the big one. You're going to go over in the big one. Yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. So we did it, and I felt like we were going to do something. But the minute I did a match with Dan, it felt like there was no chemistry. There was no excitement. I mean, when you watch the match, it was flat. Like I'm trying to get him to come out. I'm trying to get him to show emotion. And it just, like, I was the one selling. I was the one doing all of this, but he was straight faced and, doing his thing. And it just didn't work. And they saw it, and I felt it. I felt it when I was in with him. I'm like, dude, we need to get this thing. I mean, come on, like, let's go, get angry, do something, like, beat the shit out of me, go hard. And it just couldn't get there. Like, it just felt like we were just like, it was stagnant. And I felt it too. It wasn't just Vince and them. When you watch the match, I thought the match was good, but there's got to be some selling, and there's got to be some back and forth on give and take, and it just didn't seem like it was that.
Right. Right. I kind of felt that was Dan's entire run. Even as a little kid when I was jaded and it was still real to me, I couldn't get into him. And now that you said that the selling, he didn't really seem like he ever wanted to do that much.
Yeah, he
And
was
that's
straight
what's crazy.
faced and didn't know how. They had actually approached me to do the tournament,
Okay.
and I was laughing. Right, I'm thinking in the back of my head, "Oh, you're not getting that for free.
Mm.
You're not getting Dan Severn and Ken Shamrock for free."
Right.
And you're not putting gloves on me to get there, right? I mean, like, that's not happening. And Dan Severn don't want gloves on either. I mean, that's just not who we were. I was a better striker than Dan anyway, so that would have definitely hurt him if me and him would have fought during that, because I was a much
Yeah.
better striker. But for me, it just felt like you were watering down uh, a mixed martial arts competition, and that all I had going into that, it was everything to lose and nothing to gain, because I'm supposed to win that. I'm supposed to be the better guy. And you're putting gloves on me now, which now hinders me, just like it did Dan. It hinders you from really doing what you do best. And it just felt like that was one of those setups. Like you were literally being set up to lose, because of the nature of the event. You had to wear gloves. You can hit them, but if you take them down, you can only stay down so long, and they stand you back up again. And it just felt like I worked my whole career, and then all of a sudden I made a change, and I was going into pro wrestling, back into pro wrestling, and I understood in pro wrestling it's everything about trust when you go into that ring. Because if your opponent does not trust that you're going to be where you're supposed to be, or that you're going to, when you throw a punch, that you're going to pull it and you're not going to hit him and knock him out, which is
Right.
already there with me, then you're not going to have good matches, because they're always going to be shying away from you, or always skittish with you, and they're not going to be loose. And now you're
Yeah.
putting me back into this scenario where I'm going to go in and beat the shit out of these guys, because I would have beat them up. Even though it's set up for me to lose, I would have beat them up. And then I would have went back into pro wrestling, and these same guys that are in there, I'm going to wrestle, and they're going to go, is he going to hit me again? The trust is going to be shaken. And so I made a commitment that I was going to do pro wrestling, and then I was going to try to be my best pro wrestler. And then you're going to throw me back into the mixed martial art event while I'm wrestling. And I just felt like that was a bad move for me. And I had nothing to gain. They were going to pay me $50,000 if you won. And so you had to fight 2 or 3 times, and then you get paid 50 grand. And I told them, I said, you know what? If the money's right, I'll think about it. But you're talking $1 million or more. That's the monies I'm making when I'm doing MMA, and they're going to put me in the same kind of thing, but with gloves on, and you're going to pay me 50 grand, and I'm going to fight twice or 3 times. It's like, I was like,
Right.
none of everything I just said is what went through my head. None of it made sense.
Yeah. Even as a little kid, and again, still real to me at the time, it was so weird watching the brawl for all the stuff like that, because it didn't fit. Like I didn't understand. And I think when it comes to pro wrestling, the child's mindset is the purest as far as gauging what works and what doesn't, just because they don't know, that this isn't, this is work. So when I was thinking about all that kind of stuff, it was just, what's the difference? Why am I watching guys do this as opposed to, what they're doing on the other end? It didn't work. And obviously history doesn't remember it kind at all. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. Well, how did the end of your run there at WWF come about?
Well, there a lot of things that transpired. You had that screw job with Bret Hart. We talked
Mm,
about trust just a moment ago. It
yeah,
felt like, I was building trust. I was fitting right in. Things were running around smooth. I felt good. I didn't feel like I was being used the way I want. I was discouraged because I watched The Rock climb. I watched Stone Cold climb. I mean, I watched all these people were climbing, and I was staying in the same place. And I felt
yeah,
frustrated on not being used the way I thought they were going to use me, which was the world's most dangerous man. And instead, which is great because Stone Cold, I mean, did tremendous, and you seen Rock. The Rock did tremendous, but that was my character. My character was to be, I don't care about anything. I don't give a crap. I'm going to beat the hell out of anybody. And they literally put it on someone else. And then I was just there to bring in the crossover from mixed martial arts. I wasn't going anywhere. And so it just felt like I was just spinning my wheels. I wasn't going anywhere. And I always said in the back of my mind that if I was going to go back, that this was just a transition to try to make some money, although I fell in love with it. And I would have stayed there if I felt like there was a future. I didn't feel like I was going anywhere. And so I felt like, okay, it's time for me to move and go back into the fighting and see what's left. Because it was starting to take off again. So I made that move. And I remember going to Japan and I won 2 out of 3 of my fights there. Obviously, I struggled in a few of them. I wasn't the same guy after being on the road that many times and taking those bumps. I got beat up pretty good in pro wrestling. So it came back. The sport had really moved into a tremendous distance from what I was used to it being. So I was catching up, even coming back in. But my love of the sport didn't matter because I was still competing and I was still having fun and I enjoyed it. But I had to make that move because I felt like if I would have stayed, I would have just been tucked away and buried in the undercard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So one of my favorite promotions, in general is TNA. And I remember scrolling through. Okay, I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but once upon a time, children, you had to watch a TV guide on the screen, and it would scroll and show you what time your show was on, right? So I would watch that looking for a show, and in the corner, I think it would either be on the top right or the top left. There would be a video playing that would be advertising either a show that was on, a pay-per-view you have to buy, whatever. And I saw a commercial for TNA when they were still doing their weekly pay-per-views. And I was just kind of watching. I was like, okay. And then boom, your face popped. I was like, whoa, how did that come about when the Jarretts contacted you? How were you kind of hesitant in doing, a weekly pay-per-view style, or was it one of those things where you were like, oh, this is new, this is intriguing, I want to do it?
No, actually, I when they actually talked to me about it, I told them I was preparing for the Tito fight. I was going to be fighting. Hadn't actually committed to it yet or started training yet, but I knew it was coming. And so they would talk about me, doing the wrestling thing. And I said, I don't know if I can. I said, I got a fight coming up. And they basically said, well, we're just doing, and I don't remember what it was. It was one taping a month or a week. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't many tapings. So I was only going there once or twice a month to do a taping. And I was like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. And so that's how it really been, because I was getting ready to train for the Tito fight. And so I didn't know they were expecting to hang the strap on me either, because that I didn't realize that was the plan. But when I went in there, I started doing work there, and I started realizing real quick, like this is fun. Like I felt like, wow, I'm going somewhere. Like there's a direction here, as opposed to where I just felt like I was getting lost in the shuffle. Had so many things going on at WWF that I felt like I was getting lost. Right. But here I felt like, wow, these guys are using me. They're pushing me. So I started doing it. And then when they put the strap on me, it was awesome. Then I had to drop it. And I had to drop it a lot sooner than I wanted to, because that's when the actual deal came together with the Tito fight. And I had to go away and start training. So I told them, I can't do this no more. I got to go. And so that's when they had me drop the strap, and then shortly after that, you saw I wasn't there anymore. And it's not, a lot of people, there's some things saying, well, he got mad because he lost the strap. No, it was because I already prepared that I had to leave because I was going to train for the Tito fight. And so this was prepared for me to drop the strap, and then I had to go. So there was no frustration or anger with me. That was a great company. I really, really enjoyed working with the Jarretts, and it was awesome. Awesome time.
Absolutely was. It at the time, I was kind of coming out of my wrestling stage. I was getting more into music, but that's the first thing that put TNA in my head was seeing you in it. And then later I became a mega fan, so I was able to go back and watch all that stuff. But it really was a fun time in wrestling. Absolutely. Well, do you have any crazy Owen Hart stories that you could tell, or do you have any Owen Hart stories that you can't tell? One or the other.
Yeah. No, I listen. Um, I didn't hang around Owen a lot. I
Okay.
was, had a crew that I hung with, but and even Brett, I didn't hang around those guys either, but I was part of that crew. I went up there and trained with Brett. Brett helped me prepare. So I was around Owen at those times. But when I actually got into it, I basically traveled with other people, but I was always close to those guys. I was always close to the Canadian guys. And that's kind of what the crew I was with. I was connected with. And so I just know that Owen was one of the good ones. Like
Yeah.
he was pure, seemed like he told you something, you could guarantee that's what it was, unless he's ribbing you, which is something he did a lot. But it was just a fun guy to be around. And like I said, you talk in different times where someone passes away and you hear somebody say, "Hey man, he was one of the good ones." That's who he was. He was one of the good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's weird too, because again, small child, he came off as such a good heel. And when you guys had your tag run together, I didn't vibe with that at all. And it wasn't because of you. It was because I would look at Owen Hart with the smile on his face, and it was like, this doesn't work. You know, and to go back and after all this time, obviously, and see all the positive things that everyone said about him over the years. It was like a yin and a yang. You turn the camera on, and he was one of the most vile individuals on screen, and then backstage, everybody, like you said the same thing. He was one of the good ones, and definitely a tough loss.
Yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
the ones in the industry where you miss him. You'll miss him, right?
Yeah. Right up there. That was one of the first things when Bray Wyatt passed away recently. That was the first thing I thought of was, man, this is our generation's Owen Hart,
Yeah.
unfortunately. It was tough. But seeing the stuff that you were able to do with him in the program, man, whew, that Lions Den match was so cool. Whose idea was it to come up with that?
Yeah, it was mine.
Okay.
The design of that cage, I designed the cage, and they wanted to kind of come in and do the same kind of thing you'd see at the UFC, where it was up, straight up and down, and it would be, kind of a similar of an octagon. And I told them, I
Yeah.
said, if you do that, we won't have any action off the screen or anything. Won't be able to do anything. But if we put it and we slant it, we can still use that. Otherwise, we're going to be trapped in there, and there's not going to be a whole lot we can do. So that's
Yeah.
why there was that slant, and then there was rails on top where you could go up top, because it gave you an opportunity to do anything you want to, run up the side, get to the top, jump off. So a lot of things that we could have done with that. And so the design of it, I definitely came up with, and they wanted to come up with something similar to what I made my name in, which was the UFC. And so I thought they did a great job with putting that cage together. And then for us to go in there, and for Owen, for never really having to be inside of one of those things before, did a tremendous job with being able to work with me in that cage. And I to this day, I'm I just wish that we would be able to keep that around.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very cool visual. Well, as we kind of wind down here, you think over your career, what's the first thing that pops up?
Oh, I would say privileged, just very, very
Yeah.
privileged and honored that I had the opportunities that I had. But I say this to anyone coming up, is like, opportunities will present themselves. I mean, for everyone. What you do with those opportunities is important, because a lot of people see opportunities, and sometimes it comes easy, and sometimes it doesn't come as easy as you want it to. But the one thing that I can say is that every successful person has, is when you get those opportunities, you exhaust every effort to be the best you can be.
Yes. Absolutely. Could not agree more. Could not agree more. Well, when I talk to anybody that's been in the professional wrestling industry, I say the same thing. And my viewers at this point are probably tired of hearing me say it, and I don't care. Thank you so much for everything you've done for the industry, putting your body on the line, entertaining people all these years. As fans, it means a lot. Even though I don't know how often you hear it, but I at least want to make sure I get the opportunity to say thank you. One of my favorite memories as a child, actually, it was in right outside of Marietta, I think. My dad used to live there, and we would stay with him in the summer. And the your King of the Ring win was we were watching that pay per view live, me, my sisters, and my father, and being able to have that memory. That's what I think of when I think of that King of the Ring, is just being in Georgia and watching, you guys do what you do live. Because we didn't get pay-per-views very often. We didn't have a whole lot of money, either whether it been with my mom or my dad. So it was a rare treat to experience stuff like that, and you were a part of it. So thank you very much. Well, I guess the last couple of minutes, my man, I just kind of want to hand it over to you. If there's anything you want to plug specifically, socials, whatever, floor is yours.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate you having me on. You can go to my booking at kenshamrock.com if you want to bring me in for events. I really enjoy being able to do motivational speaking. I work with at-risk kids. It's something close to my heart because I was one of those kids. So, just go to booking at kenshamrock.com and you can pull that up and fill out the form, and I'd come out and whatever you need me to do with the kids, or if you've got a group of people that you want me to speak to and motivate, that's what I do. So again, I appreciate you having me on. We have a bare knuckle event that we've got coming up. Is Valor Bare Knuckle. We had 2 events now. We're really building this structure behind it. So we'll see what happens in the future. Right now we're on pause. So probably you'll hear something next 6 months about where and what we're doing with Valor. So again, thank you so much for having me. It's been a true honor.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, my man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.